I'm going to use the FRC mix that I just made in a previous video. I'm going to start applying it to this styrofoam form. The first thing I need to do is you need to force it into the styrofoam. It has a rough surface. I need to rub it in, very thin layer here. And I'm trying to create bonding between the styrofoam and the cement. Styrofoam has texture now. I roughed it up with a wire brush. So this mixture is very sticky because I mixed the bonder into it, and it has the hydration control, which also adds a lot of, and the pangle. It had a lot of stickiness here. So I'm just trying to, we're not going to film this whole process. This takes a while. To cover this whole thing will probably take me at least minimum, I'd say, 30 minutes. So what I've done now, it took a minute or so. I covered the top planes, which are the easiest for me to get to at this angle. And I'm going to add more of this FRC mix, the glass fiber cement mixture. I need to build it up to at least a ½ inch thick. So just kind of, I don't know if you can see now. Camera man here, it told me that it's a little hard to see, but there's different planes here. You can kind of see them on the bottom. There's different planes. It's a multi-plane form. So if I can get this, ½ inch to 3/4 inch thick, it'll be plenty strong with all the fiber in it. I'm covering each individual plane now with a roughly 3/4 inch thick. Now, like I said, we'll probably stop the camera as we go occasionally here, because you're not going to have to see every little thing here. And it'll save me some editing later on. I'm having to remove a lot, so. So I'm building it up, like I said, a ½ to 3/4. If it's really thick, if it's, the thicker it is, the heavier it gets too. So that's somewhat of a concern, not to make it too heavy. I want to keep the weight down. So I'm trying not to get the stuff on my skin. I took my gloves off that I had on earlier. I'm using the trowel to apply now. If you get it on your skin, you should rinse it off in a reasonable amount of time. So I covered 4 surfaces. You can only probably see 1 or 2 that I have covered completely. Now I'm covering another surface here. Once again, I'm forcing the wet material on a very thin layer into the styrofoam so it grabs the roughened up styrofoam surface. In my bucket, I'm getting a little low. I think I have enough left to cover this plane here. Once I have that on there, once again I'm going to add more. I'm trying to thicken it up to roughly somewhere near ½ inch. Depending on what you're doing, you might need to be more careful or not. These are somewhat abstract forms I'm working with right now. This form that I'm coating is pretty abstract, so I don't have to have, absolute perfection surface thickness. I want to be around ½ inch everywhere though, because it gives good strength. And after this is done, this coating here has a lot of fiber in it, and it looks so pretty, but what I'm going to do later on is I'm going to go back and put a finish coat on top of it, which will be the final surface that people see. And then I also mentioned in a previous video how I will, with this particular form, some of the planes are going to be open. So what I do later on is this plane here I'm not going to cover, and then there'll be others I don't want to cover either, and I'll decide that later. What I found was easiest for me is to cut out the facets later. So right now I'm just trying to get it covered. I don't want to think too much about, exactly what sides I want to leave open right now. I'm just going to cover the whole thing, and I'm going to go back later on and cut out surfaces. Now, the problem about cutting out surfaces with FRC, which, in the classroom with students, I would probably discourage them from cutting FRC because the fiberglass gets airborne. I'm working at a home studio here, okay, and I could cut this stuff, but the glass fiber gets airborne, and it's pretty itchy stuff. So, in a classroom environment, I'm going to encourage that you don't cut anything. Sometimes the cement mixture gets kind of stuck to your trowel, your tool that you're working with. And I'm using this flat trowel shape here. It works very well for what I'm doing right now. They come in different shapes, but this one seems to have been working well for this particular form. So, and once in a while what I do is I have to wipe off the trowel because the stuff gets, it sticks on the trowel too much. So the way to do that is either dunk your trowel in some water or take a wet sponge and kind of wet the trowel, and it slides a little easier then again on the surface here. So you just kind of have to see what's happening. If it's sticking more than you'd like and not getting kind of hard to work with, you could wet the trowel. As I said, either by dunking it in a bucket or taking a sponge which is wet. Just finishing up this form here. On this form there's 2 batches of 200 ounces and then a very small batch because I just ran out at the end. So there's probably about 450 ounces of wet mix on here. Well, of dry mix, I should say. Of dry mix on here. There's 450 ounces of dry mix that I used to make this. And I'm just finishing up this one. After I'm done with this, I'm going to go ahead and let this firm up. Normally I wouldn't put a second coat over it until it dries for at least half an hour to 45 minutes. It gets a little bit firm. And then I could put a second coat on it. For various reasons I don't have to go into now. I'm going to let this firm up and then come back another day and put the second coat on there. Okay. Alright. Which you can do. You can also come back another day. If you do that bonding chemical, I usually spray that on the surface of it before I put the next coat over it. Alright, so after finishing coating the shape, whatever the form is, I usually go back while it's still slightly wet and I remove fibers that are sticking out. And the reason why is when I put the next coat on, if those fibers, once the cement hardens and those fibers are sticking out, they're really hard to deal with because they shoot straight out in space and you can't get rid of them easily. So what I usually do is just, kind of look over the whole form and I pick off loose fibers that I see. And I'll go ahead and rotate the whole shape and try to remove little fibers that are sticking out. It doesn't take much effort now because the cement is still very wet. But I would recommend doing just a quick kind of going over the whole surface very quickly and cleaning it up.